I'm going to go live now. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cosmos Society Online Open House Series. I'm Keith Stone, and our guest today is Dr. Manuela Pellegrino. She earned her degree at University College London, and for this group, I'll mention that she has among her research appointments a CHS fellowship. Since 2006, Manuela has been conducting research among Greco speakers and activists in Salentine, Greece, in southern Italy, where she herself is from the village of Zolino, and also her research is among aficionados of Greco in Greece. Her monograph on the subject is one of the most recently published books in our center's Hellenic Studies series, and is available on the CHS website in its entirety. The title of her book is also the title of our conversation today, Greek Language, Italian Landscape. And our starting point is chapter 6 of the book, Certain Things Never Change, and those sound better in Greco, living with the language. So, Manuela, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure. We've worked together before in publishing some poems at the beginning of the pandemic. And now we're back.
Good afternoon to you and everyone else in the US. Good morning to everyone in the US, and good afternoon to everyone who's joining us from Europe. I wanted to thank you personally, Keith, for this invitation, for giving me the opportunity to talk about my work on Greco and also the book. And I thank everyone, as I said, who is going to join us. Before starting, I just want to give you a sense of who I am and what this book is. This book is not just a book. I guess any author would claim the same. For me, it's flesh and ink for many reasons. As you said, I come from the very place. I come from a Greco-speaking village. And for those who opened actually the book, it opens with my grandmother Lavretana asking me, "Te li spirinerò." And this sentence has been very important to me in many reasons. And Greco has been shaping my life, really. But it is also an old interest of mine. I found out among the many books in my mother's house, also a notebook of mine from my school years, in which I had put down the sentences that my grandmother would say in the house, that I would hear my parents using when they did not want me to understand, which is usually what they did. So I have to clarify, I'm not a mother tongue speaker. This is particularly important to mother tongue speakers. So I clarify that I learned it through time, and I spend a lot of time with elderly people, actually. And you will see some of them, in the pictures that I put on the PowerPoint. But also, I want you to know that this is not for me, Greco is not for me a topic of anthropological investigation only, but anthropology gave me the tool to scrutinize the reality of Greco, to engage critically with what has been happening in the last 3 decades in particular, if we talk about let's say the recent developments. And that sentence that I mentioned at the beginning, te li spirinerò, came again in my life when I was in Bremen, when I was an Erasmus student. And at the time I met a Greek student, Nico, and I was very proud to tell him, te li spirinerò, te li spirikrasi. So he was then the one who introduced me to the world of anthropology. So it's been a circle that closes itself. And the last point I want to make, just to introduce myself, is to say that writing anthropology, about Greco is my personal form of activism. You will hear me say that there are a lot of different forms of language activism, but this is my personal one, and it's not an easy task either. It's been a long process. This book has been really shaping my life. So let's start about the place where it is used. And it is used in the region of Apulia. Greco is spoken mainly by the elderly in the province of Lecce, in Salento. There is also another community that speaks Greco, and that's in Calabria. They are often either considered one or confused. And again, because this is important to the very people, Greco with an I is spoken in Salento, and Greco with an I is spoken in Calabria. These are different languages which had a different development through time. As you can see, the two communities are also very far from each other. So even today, the two communities are trying to work together. It's not the physical distance, the geographical distance, the shortage of trains, and southern Italy, does not help in these attempts in the present either. But as I said, I'm going to talk about Greco, that's spoken in Salento. Right now, there is an administrative area called Unione dei Comuni della Grecia Salentina, and this was constituted in 2001, and you can see the villages that belong to it. But this is just a very small part of what used to be Grecia Salentina in the past, and it is basically been shrinking through time. And not only the villages are less than they used to be in the past, but also the very people that speak the language have been diminishing through time. So just to give you a flavor of the place itself, I put down a few pictures of the villages. This is the village of Calimera. And
oh, Manuela, I just realized that you're sharing the slides, but we're not seeing them. Let's maybe try to reshare them. Okay. Let's see what happens. There, something is coming. Yes. So is there anything that you would like to review from the beginning slides quickly? I see that you're only a few slides in.
Yeah, that's right. So as I was saying, this is Italy. Greco is spoken and used in Apulia, Greco in Calabria. They are very distant from each other. This is the extant Grecia Salentina, and this is what used to be in the past, much bigger area. Now, the village of Calimera, as I was saying, just to give you a flavor, that's my home village of Zollino, my father's home village, Sternatia. This is my mother's home village, Martano, and Corigliano. These are the main villages where I worked. Now, the story of Greco is complicated by a very early prophecy, which goes back to 1867, when the linguist Morosi first came to do his own research. It was previously discovered by a German philologist, Witte. But Morosi, in those years, foresaw the death of Greco within 2 generations. And I like to put this slide because then a century and a half later, there is that comment by Paolo Dimitri that says, well, as Greco died, may it rest in peace then. Are we who write Greco then dead? Are you reading it dead? So it is a way of showing that actually this prophecy never happened. People kept living with this prophecy. And this book is not just about the language, it's about the people that speak the language, and I want to show you a few of them. Data was one of my teachers, and she passed away just a month and a half ago, but I managed to give her the book, so I'm really happy that she could see it before leaving this world. And now, before I cry, I'm trying to move elsewhere. This is Antimino. This is another of my Greco teachers and life teachers, really. And then here, Uccio, who is the father of one of my best friends, who's actually left this world as well as Uccia. These are unfortunately all people that in the meantime are not able to see us. Giulio is well and alive, and is a very close friend of mine. So these are my parents. I just wanted to put a picture of them. My father passed away, but I'm sure he would be happy for me today. And this is one of a recent picture of the community itself, and a lot of people that I'm going to mention are actually in this picture. I'm going to move quickly forward to let you know what I did actually was fieldwork not only in Grecia Salentina but also in Greece. So this research comes out of interviews with speakers, with leaders of cultural associations, with all the people actually that engage with Greco, teachers, local Greco scholars, aficionados, and so on. And I basically took part in any language-related activity and initiative. And I also used written sources, past newspapers, articles, but also Facebook pages more recently to complement the research. So the research was, I did it as part of my PhD. And this is, I'm going to just tell you briefly what the book covers. As I said, this is a book that tries to give a diachronic unification of Italy, and what's been happening with the language and what people have been doing to preserve it, to save it. So the first chapter gives an historical overview, but I also present the first attempt at reviving the language, which goes back to the end of the 20th century, when a group of intellectuals from the village of Calimera, around the figure of Vito Domenico Palumbo, started actually collecting the oral tradition, poems, collecting all the material, and also contributing with their own productions. And that's also when the contacts with Greece were reestablished after centuries of silence. In chapter 2, I then moved to discuss the language shift away from Greco, and there I based all the chapter on the narratives that I collected from elderly Greco speakers. And in this respect, it is important to say that Greco was actually, let's say, abandoned following, people started abandoning the language as part of this shift to modernity, which was intensified after World War II. And what they actually underwent, this is what I argue, was not just a language displacement, this confusion about what language they were meant to use, because they were under the symbolic violence, let's say, the symbolic domination of Italian as the language of the future and of progress. But what they actually suffered was a sort of existential displacement, and that was then encoded through language. But I actually tried to enhance, to improve their social conditions, shifting away from Greco. And in these narratives, there is a lot of pain. They take responsibility for language shift, but at the same time, they try to defer it. It's a very complex process they went through. And when the pool of speakers actually had dramatically decreased, again, there was a new phase in the revival of Greco, and cultural associations and local activists, politically engaged activists at that point, tried to rewrite the story of Greco, reappropriating the past. And what I mean by that is by fostering the revival of cultural practices that had gone into disuse throughout time. And the folk music repertoire was played a big role at the time, and it keeps playing a big role also at present. This is the marble stone, the Attic marble stone that was placed in the gardens of Calimera in the 60s, and it was. I wanted to put this picture down because it exemplifies in some way the embrace between a mother and a dead daughter. So here there is the symbolic transposition of mother Greece and daughter Grecia Salentina that points to the attention that Greece had started to pay to this enclave. But as I said, the local activists try to reappropriate the past to give a new value to it by reviving old cultural practices such as I Passuna tu Christou, which is a form of popular theater in Greco, which narrates the death and the resurrection of the Christ. And this has been was the object of interest for cultural activists in the 70s and 80s, and now it keeps being performed. I'll go back to this in a bit. The present, the chapter that talks about the current revival, which then generated around the 90s, it's called From the Land of Remorse, which is clearly a reference to the Martino's book on the south of Italy, and the Land of Resource, because at the moment Greco, together with the folk music repertoire, have been transformed into the symbols of Salento and not only, and have put this periphery actually on the global stage. And one of the ways in which even visually the environment started changing was with these welcoming signs, which are placed at the entrance of each village. And as I mentioned earlier on, the importance given to the folk music repertoire through a very important festival, which is today internationally well known. It's called La Notte della Taranta, the night of the Tarantula. And these are the sort of spontaneous happenings in a local taverna, which preceded the institutionalization of the revival. I can never pronounce that right. So this is one of the performances. Actually, goes back to 2008. The event is criticized for being too commercial at the moment, but I won't get into that. Going back to Greco, which gives us enough to talk about, chapter 5 discusses the current language scape and all the, let's say, the ideological debates that surround Greco. Ideological debates are, this is the definition of Blumert, debates which are not about the language itself, but about the ideologies around the language. So at present, the Greco community is very engaged with a lot of issues surrounding how to transcribe Greco, to what, where to take the words that Greco lacks, because Greco lacks a lot of words clearly related to modernity because of its own story. And people debate whether to take them from modern Greek or from Italian, from Salentine, as was the practice up until recently. So a lot of debates animate the locals. How to transcribe it, as I said, is also very much discussed. And this is a a picture again, which shows the complexity of the situation, because Artopolio is written with the Greek alphabet, and clearly this is not this is an obstacle for all the locals that actually do not know the Greek alphabet and the Greek speakers themselves. But the funny part about it is that Artopio in modern Greek literally means the place where bread is baked. The story here goes that the owner of this bakery, Martano, wanted to use the Greek word for bakery and asked a local scholar, Professor Sicuro, for help. And he came up with this word, Artopolio, which is where the place where the bread is sold. But what probably ignored is that Artopolio is seldom used in Greece, and what they use is Artopio, Practorio Artu, or Furno, which is curiously borrowed from Italian. So there is this trying to match the expectations and then failing at the same time. And the orthographic conventions, as I said, have never been fixed. So everyone tends to write according to their own feeling, and they all claim that they do trying to facilitate the readers. But here there is something else important, because like in this Spita article, Spita is a journal written in Greco. You get on the left-hand side the H, which corresponds to the Greek he, the letter he, and then on the right-hand side you see the same letter transcribed with the ch. So the reference, the very alphabet to which they refer is different. It's either Italian or Greek, obviously. So debates around the authenticity of Greco are very common. But what, and then I'm going to skip chapter 6, which is what I'm going to talk for the rest of the talk. But the book also includes the ethnography that I carried out in Greece, where I spent time not only in Athens, but I traveled around Greece following the cultural associations and the aficionados that deal with Greco. And I must say that I miss Greece. I look forward to going back, and hopefully COVID will allow me that soon. Now, for the rest of the talk, I'm going to talk about chapter 6. Certain things never change, and those sound better in Greco. In this chapter, what I actually did was to continue to focus on the current linguistic landscape, which does not only include Greco and Salentine, which is the local Romance dialect, but also Italian, of course, and they all coexist in a dialogical relationship with one another. What has always been argued about Greco, as I said at the beginning, is that it's a dying language, and a lot of linguistic researches have been done on the topic. The language has been documented. There is a lot of discussions also in academic circles around language death, revival, revitalization, reclamation, and so on. What I wanted to do in this chapter was basically to show what people do with the language, as opposed to whether the language is dead or alive. People live with the language, people use it in different ways. They may write, they may translate, they may compose. They use Greco in a multiple forms, but it is not spoken as a language of daily communication, and it is lost, let's say, this function. We communicate using Salentine or Italian as effectively, but when Greco is spoken, then it is something that people do for a purpose. So the very use of Greco is loaded in those moments. Now, I wanted to show you a video of Ipasuna to Christu, but we've had technical issues, so I'm not sure whether I'm not gonna even try because I'm gonna get entangled in technical problems. But as I mentioned earlier on, Ipasuna to Christu, which is this form of popular theater, and there you I put down a bit of the lyric just for you to get an idea about how the language sounds. Let me read it because I won't sing it. My friends would kill me because I cannot sing. Okay. Ciasca mesha citar galio, a cittorio pinto pustece can, anechi testara, masferni dio, catue, in emere silipimene. Asca suscetta, attacanulacia, ciamo in fione ci sto puddari. Cede, cavrischi mia chigliata, sema, masferni in centinari. It was a quest song. It was at the end of the performance, they would ask for eggs for some sort of compensation. This is my friend Anu, the one that would have not allowed me to sing the Passione, because she's the one that actually has been taking on the tradition in Zolino together with another friend, with Donato. And I put her picture there performing the Passion to clarify that she's been also teaching it to children, and the video that I wanted to show showed the children at the end of the performance singing all together with the old cantori. But what's peculiar about Anno, and the reason why I want to dwell on it a little bit more, is that Anno does not seem to have any intention to learn Greco, to improve her Greco, to get involved with the grammar of Greco. I have been trying to convince her to join those who are willing to learn it, but I've been failing for years. And then I thought, well, maybe I am asking myself the wrong question. Maybe I should look at what she does with Greco. And she does a lot with it. She does not only sing the Passion and teach the Passion, but she uses Greco in a particular way. Her vocabulary is restricted to the words that she knows from the Passion of the Christ, from the very lyrics, or from words that she learned from a grandmother, her own father, who was a Greco speaker. She has a very emotional attachment to this language. I once asked her to put down what Greco meant to her, and she put this sentence down. Ivo agapoto Greco yati ene glossati manamo, ceti nonna todossia. I love Greco because it's the language of my mother and of my grandmother, Todossia. And so what she does, it's what I call generational crossing. Crossing is actually a term that Rampton coined to refer to the use of a language which is not generally thought to belong to the speaker. And he used this term in reference to white, Asian, and Caribbean British adolescents who would borrow and mix codes as a way of crossing ethnic boundaries. But what I claimed in the case of Greco, what Anno and other people belonging to this younger generation who do not have, who do not use the language usually, what they do with it is that they cross the generational distance, the time that separates them from their own parents and grandparents. So Greco, as I said, is perceived to be the language of the elderly and of their experiential world. It is a world that the younger generation has not inhabited. But what they do, as Anno well, among them, is that they resourcefully decontextualize and recontextualize the limited linguistic resources which are available to them. And by doing so, they cross the generational distance and in some way they perform their Greco-ness. This idea of generational crossing was my attempt to foreground the ways in which Greco can be meaningful to people beside being spoken as a language of daily communication to exchange information. And in what happens during the current revival, another phenomenon which I noticed and which I found relevant is the fact that people engage with writing in Greco. When I refer to this idea of epidemic of writing, just to say that I find this engagement by the elderly in particular very interesting, because it is clear that once we have the shift from an oral to a written mode of communication, this shift is never neutral, and there is always a claim for authority going on. And so what they do when Uccia, for instance, composed this one among the many poems that she wrote, she was in a way claiming her own authority over Greco, but also by putting Greco down, she was claiming the recognition of Greco as a language itself, because they've been internalizing this idea that a language is such once it is actually written. Unfortunately, again, let me see if I'll try later. Let me try and play this song for you, because probably this is the only one which is not creating issues. Okay, it's nice to keep listening to it, but this was just a demonstration of what Greco can do. This is, as the picture shows, it's Luigi Garrisi's song, and here he's singing with Eleonora Petrulli, who's actually a Greco speaker from Calabria. So they collaborated for this for singing this particular song in particular. But the example that I am using here of Luigi Garrisi is just one of many, because there are other people that like the brothers, the Santi brothers, who have been for years contributing to saving the language by putting into music the poems written by their own father. It was a local cultore del Greco and language activist. their own poems. And this is what I find particularly interesting. The fact that people have been finding composing in Greek very productive. And that's why the title, there are certain things never change and those sound better in Greco, captured this feeling, this idea that even if Greco lacks the words to talk about the present, it can express timeless emotions and feelings. And the poems that people compose have also an attention to the aesthetic, which is very simple. People look for rhymes, but the fact that then these poems are set into music keeps contributing to the circulation of the language, to the language taking part, being.
Well, it looks as though we lost our connection with Manuela for the moment. Hopefully she'll rejoin us. I have one of the videos that she was intending to play, so maybe in the meantime, while she is reconnecting, I will play one of those. I won't have the words to display, but you can see the performance here. Okay, so she was talking about the performance of the Passion of the Christ, and this was the person Anu she was talking about. Let's see here.
Can you hear me?
You can't hear.
Can you hear me?
Oh, Manuela, you're back. I was just trying to play this video that you had sent me earlier.
Let's see if I can play it.
Well, I can, I think, share my sounds correctly this time. No, we can't see your screen.
Can you hear it?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Here, let me give it a try. Okay, so now you should be able to see the video again, and this time, hear it.
As casas cheias
So is there anything you would like to say about that video now that we got it to play?
What can I say more? I think it speaks for itself. Well, at least it speaks for itself to me. Among the young people, there is my niece, Carola, the daughter of one of my sisters. Again, she's one of my failures. She does not want to learn Greco, but at least she sings the Passion. And she was happy the other day that she knew what paleontologo came from, because she remembered that I told her that paleo was vecchio, old. So these are all my victories, unfortunately. And I feel a little bit uncomfortable when people thank me for what I do for the language, because I don't think, if we did intend that I transmit the language, then I should not take that compliment. What I try and do is, as I said, show the story of Greco, which is multi-layered, is very complex, is often simplified, and day by day, this process of, let's say, commodification of languages, of cultures, is increasing. But as I say, writing anthropology is my form of activism. And my other contribution, if we wanted to call it that way, is that I recently started myself writing poems in Greco. Keith, you were actually the one that opened that adventure for me, because I had simply written them and put them in one of my folders on my computer without sharing those poems. And with that experience with you, I started sharing also my Greco works to the world. So
I'll make sure to share that link with the video later so that everyone can take a look.
Yeah. So that's my new way of dealing with Greco. I want to write in Greco, about Greco, and using poetry. So it's a very ambitious project. My new ethnographic poetry in Greco is my new journey through Greco. I think I'll stop here. I don't know if you want to play the other two things the links that I sent you, just for people to get.
Yeah, I can do that. But first, maybe we'll take any questions that people may have. Let me change the view here. All right. Let's have a conversation. Claudie, I see that you have a question. But you're unmuted now.
Thank you very much, Manuela, for this presentazione molto interessante. You mentioned Greco in Grecia Salentina, Greco in Calabria, and I was thinking about the other Greek settlements in Italy. For instance, on the other side, Peston, south of Salerno. Are there any remnants of Greek on that side too, of another form of Greco?
No, the only two Greek deriving dialects are Greco in Apulia and Greco in Calabria. Clearly, the south of Italy was once part of Magna Grecia, so there are other remains, but not in terms of language. The language is only kept in these two areas. And one of the reasons people, scholars argue that that was the isolation in which these two places, these two communities were, that allowed for the preservation of the language.
Thank you.
But there are other communities.
And the other thing too, is there some kind of revival of Greco in schools, or an attempt at trying to teach the children? Oh, there is.
Yeah, there is. I should have mentioned that since 1999, both Greco and Greco been recognized as minority languages within the Italian legislation. We're also granted the possibility to be taught in schools. But the teaching of Greco within the schools is part of one of one of the chapters of the book is a very contested topic. But what I want to emphasize here is that even if Greco is taught, it's not the language to be taught. It's more the cultural practices around Greco, the poems. It's more the traditions surrounding Greco rather than the grammar, rather than speaking it. That's not what actually the Greco experts, esperti di Greco, the Greco teachers, actually aim to do. So that's why my drive to show what other lives Greco can have beyond being spoken as a language of daily communication, because locals don't seem to have any faith in, let's say, reversing language shifts, to use complicated words, just to use the language in daily life. They don't have any faith in that. But what I argue is that through other means, by engaging with the language in other modalities, in any way they maintain and they express and they perform an attachment to the cultural heritage.
Thank you.
To that point, and Gogo, I see your hand, so I'll get to you next. But to this point of practices that accompany the language, in chapter 6, you mentioned something that you called pseudo-communication with the language. And I wonder, could you expand on that a bit more here? What is a pseudo-communication using Greco?
Yeah, a Ionesco type of scene created by simply using sentences that you remember being used, and simply throw them in the conversation, and someone else comes in and throws in another sentence that he remembers having heard from a grandmother, grandfather, father, whatever else, elderly members of the family. So it's this sort of, it's a game, just people rehearse the knowledge, what they remember, the sentences, but at times you get these almost meaningful conversations, and that's the one of them I report in the book, because it was quite funny, and we were just sitting around the table, and a friend of mine just threw in one sentence telling me that he wanted to tell me something. Someone else joined in and said, "Do you want some wine?" Someone else said, the baby's crying. So, that was it. But there was around the table also non-Greco speakers, people coming from the nearby villages and not having any contact with Greco. And in that context with the outsiders, it looked like we were having a meaningful conversation. So Greco in that way is used not only for these pseudo communications, but also in front of an audience that does not speak Greco. It's a way of, again, performing it. So that's about my Ionesco scene.
I see. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
So thank you for your interesting subject, very something I know little about. But I'm curious to know if there is any archaeological activity in either of these two Greek-speaking regions, and if historically there is any information you have about what places in Greece sent out, I don't know if you refer to them as colonies or settlements, which part of Greece settled the people who from whom the Greco speakers are descended?
Thank you for that question. I always expect this question to arrive. And every time I feel a little bit sorry to say that we don't have enough, let's say, historical information to confirm where from in Greece the first settlers arrived. History itself becomes a discursive practice through which people align themselves to a specific part of the past. Clearly, you mentioned that Claudia was asking me whether in Naples or around that area there is any language that derives from Greco. And I said no, but the south of Italy is full of archaeological, proofs of the presence of Greek settlers in the past. That goes beyond the language. That's something that I always want to clarify, because these are just the places where the language was retained, but clearly history, it's much, goes beyond these villages that retain the language.
This question and your answer take us back, for me, to this scene of the pseudo communication and the reaction of the person who did not understand what was going on in the language, who said something like, "You see, they really are indigenous. Yeah. They belong here. The connection is with the land in southern Italy, not with the land in Greece somehow." I found that very interesting. That's all I can say at the moment. I don't have a question in there. But.
No, but I know that it looks interesting, and I know that I know that I have been finding difficult to explain what's going on here, because the past, and we go back to the very title of the book, the restoring of a linguistic minority, is that the past is ever present in people's conversations around Greco. I mean, Greco is a meta language through which to talk about the past, but the past, it's not just a temporal category. It's a very contested terrain, because people may refer to the very recent and local past immersed in the subalternity of southern Italy, whereas other people claim belonging to Hellenism through the connections with modern Greeks today. So there are different pasts that compete, and when we say past, it's also a matter of representation, of self-understanding, and also a way to portray yourself to the others. So in the current revival, the community is very fragmented, very multi-layered. There are different claims put forward by different social actors, and the past is always a key reference, although, as I said, with it we intend different things. Please stop me, because I can go on forever talking alone.
I was wondering about the myth or the history that the community has about itself. Where do they say they're from, and how they speak the language?
Thank you for this question as well, because it gives me the opportunity to clarify another important point. Elderly mother tongue Greco speakers, even today, may not be aware of the wealth of culture that Greek as a language has. So they ignore the origins of their language, or there are no popular, let's say, legends or myths around where this language comes from, or who brought it, or anything else. So the knowledge of Greece as the capital of culture is restricted to was for a long time just restricted to the intellectuals. And it's only recently, through the recent revival, that this knowledge has been circulating around the community, and again, creating different reactions and frictions at times.
Thank you.
Well, why don't we play one of those videos? I have the one, let me see, I'll just share it, and then you can see which one it is. And
yeah,
you can say something about it.
Oh yeah.
Before I press play.
Yeah.
Is this one of the ones that you showed us the lyrics to earlier on?
The lyrics are in the book. This is my mom. And please go ahead and play it before I speak, and then I'll.
Okay.
Comincia via, mia
Do
gamba.
you hear it?
non facciamo un film che
Dai,
devi
una.
Naga
stancarla.
sono studi, mo la cagartia. Mu viaga no pedi, senza la mia umilia. Ce ito brabudarase, mu mavri se topetto, ce vuru i cardia. Mana di mu boni, na vincessa città vedi. Mu pirane si talasa, ce munjura se mai ampi. Mana di mu boni, ce beseno, giotto pedi. A posto.
Okay, that was in 2011. That recording goes back to 2011. My father was still alive. And that recording is important because in that recording, my mom is reciting a poem that my grandmother had composed for my uncle that had left for the war, World War II. And we then find out actually recently that he died in the Greek island of Rhodes in 1944, so as soon as he got there. And what is interesting about this poem is that my mom has been reciting it since ever I can remember. But she recites it even in a more, let's say, mechanic way than what we heard here. So it was always, so I never thought of the words. I never put any attention to the words. And I thought it was her poem. And then only while I was revising the book, I found out that actually she was reciting what her mother had composed. So she's been repeating it for years and years. And finally now it's also ink on paper, flesh and ink on page 176.
I think that I managed to find the lyrics here. So just for you all to have a quick look at them.
Yeah.
And of course, this is online in the book.
Yeah, so what we heard was, where do all studies and paper have to disappear? They took my child without saying a word. And the night he left, my heart turned dark, like the dark night. Mother, it hurts to think to that child who was taken to the sea and he never came back. And I will die feeling the pain of never seeing him again. Yeah, it is a sort of lamentation. I don't know who is writing it, but that's definitely the style of it. But as I said, because my mom was reciting it in a very mechanical way, I never got to feel, the pain of this poem. We actually tried something artistic with Lana Coyle that works at the Center for Hellenic Studies in a Christmas party. I asked her to sing it with me. She was the proper singer, of course, but I was just helping her. And I had taken the music of another traditional song and sort of fixed my grandmother's words into it. It was a nice gift, I think, to the women of the family. It was me performing my mother's, performing my grandmother. So I was happy with that experiment.
Are there any other questions or comments? We have time for one more, perhaps. Well, then I think all that remains. Oh, Gorgo, are you raising your hand?
I just was going to say what I put in the chat, which is that, is it the case that World War II still looms very large in the lives of the people today? I had that sense in reading your book. So I'm curious, is that still very present, or is it just this historical, poetic nostalgia and the pain that it caused?
It's a an evocation of the past. People evoke the past, and it is this discursive practice of talking about the past is what gives also meaning to Greco itself. But it's the hardship of that time is very is constantly brought up by people. But at the same time, this nostalgia, it's a double direction, because it's more than being a nostalgia about the past, about the good things about the past. It's a moral comment about the present. So there is always this dialogical struggle between what we were, what we are, why we were that way, why we are this way. So I think the struggle is in this sort of continuous comparison between past and present.
Yeah.
There is also another question, if I have 1 minute just to answer, from Jack Bogan, who asked about...
Hi, Manuel. I love your book. I want to read it more carefully, but I did read it fast for today. And it's a beautiful book that anyone who's interested in our languages, can learn a lot from, because of your anthropological lens, as well as all the wealth of detail there. The question I had was, do you think the both Greco languages are there as strong as they are because they were there all along since antiquity, or do you think they are more refugee languages from the Ottoman Turk era of Greece, or a mixture of those streams? How do you think people got there?
Yeah, I must admit that I don't have an answer to that question, but the fact that I never looked for an answer to that question also shows that my focus is more about the present, and that's not to disregard the past, but in sense historically, right? But I don't have an answer to that question. I don't know. I really don't know. I thought that your question was about the dialects, Italian dialects, gave me another opportunity to talk about the fact that Greco is just one story among many others, also locally, because Salentine, which is the local Romance dialect, which is mixed with Greco. I mean, Greek and Latin, lived in this historical symbiosis for I don't know how long. So, this is clearly evident in both the Romance dialect and Greco, this symbiosis in which they survived. But local Romance dialects in Italy are very important. I mean, Italy is clearly, in Italy we speak Italian, but the majority of people would also speak the local Romance dialect or the local minority language. So Italy is a very multilingual place, and which is, not surprising to Italians, but this idea of dialects seems to attract a lot the attention of foreigners. So in my daily life, I shift between three languages, even before learning languages. And I think this is a lot to do with also the relationship that today people have with Greco. It's a resource. It's not the only resource.
Yes, I mentioned in the chat that I have friends from southern Italy, including who, are very languages as not just being a dialect and hear them speak, you might think they're speaking Portuguese.
Yeah, in fact, they are not dialects. I mean, it's not me who's saying this, but a dialect, the difference between a dialect and a language is basically Navy and the military presence. So it's nothing to do with the linguistic facts themselves. And the local Romance dialects are not dialects of Italian. They are dialects of Latin. So
Right. They're daughter languages of Latin, or in the cases of
but they are languages in every sense. And I know that the very choice of the word language for Greco may be contested. In the Greek literature, it is referred to as either Cataitalica or as a variant of a variety of modern Greek. But people here refer to it as a glossa. So, for them, it's a language. And so I respect their own definition of it. Plus, now it's been recognized as a linguistic minority. So it makes sense to call it a language and not in any different way.
The fragment of Callimachus that talks about how, over there, they're called Hellenes, but in the West, they're called the Graikoi.
Yeah.
So, goes back to at least 300 years before Christ. It's not just a modern word.
Yeah.
Manuela, I just had one quick question for you, and following on to what Helene wrote. Did you find I know you've traveled to Greece a lot, so did you find your knowledge of Greco at all useful in communicating in modern Greek?
That's another question that I should have expected, and that I should be able to reply without problems. Allora, it's a funny story because I started learning Greco and obliging, basically, sorry, I should not have said that, but pushing my parents to speak Greco with me while learning modern Greek. So for me, it's been in some way almost simultaneous. I mean, my knowledge of Greco was, as I said, what annu, words, bunch of sentences, whatever I could remember. But I made a conscious effort to learn it through also the local grammars that have been written about Greco. But as soon as I got to Greece, I was told, oh, you speak beautifully Greek because you come from the south of Italy. So there was this idea that simply because I come from there, I learned modern Greek faster because of that. And I'm sorry to disappoint everyone, but it's got nothing to do. I think that to some extent, some pronunciations were easier for me because I knew echo, for instance, echo napedi, echo, this ch was easy for me. And so, saying it in modern Greek was okay as well. And I see now that people that want to learn Greco from Italy, from the place, fight with this pronunciation, and they would say echo, which is again, sounds weird to the ears of Greco speakers. The pronunciation is not closer to Italian or modern Greek. It depends on whether we use borrowings from Salentine and Italian or not. But for instance, we don't have the now I don't remember the specific words, but we don't say pende, we say pente. So we pronounce, for instance, the tough. So it's in every respect, it is an hybrid language. It is both. Comes, the influence from both the Romance dialect from Italian and from Greek are evident. So in every respect. It is an hybrid language, and I think it is its beauty as well. The fact that shows how the history itself, the symbiosis of cultures and languages in the past. So I find today's debates about the purity of the language, of course, fascinating as an anthropologist, but also limiting, because we should go over the presumed purity or artificiality, and just appreciate that languages coexist as people with different languages do.
I think a lot could be, when you say that about the or new Tao,
Oh, Jack, maybe you should write your question in the chat.
Yeah, because it keeps breaking.
I'm breaking up. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll try.
I'm just reading other comments just to fill the time. People saying, I find myself recalling my grandmother's words, different sides, same emotions. And this is, again, something that I noticed throughout my stay in Greece, is the fascination that Greeks have for both Greek or Greek or any other language that shares with some threads with modern Greek. It's something that fascinates a lot of Greeks. And I think it's also going back to the pronunciation, the fact that we use the pronunciation is a che as opposed to ke, clearly, put us closer to some islands rather than others. But the fact that Greek people visiting Grecia Salentina hear these sounds, wake up in them their personal emotions. They remember their own grandmother using that particular maybe word that is not used in modern Greek anymore, or the pronunciation. So the language awakes this sort of emotional rememberings.
Jack says it sounds like Greco is pronounced more like ancient Greek than mainland Greek modern pronunciations. To summarize, I think, what he was saying about the example with new taf, pende, pente.
But again, I'm not going to add anything, because I wouldn't be able to give precise information about whether it sounds more like ancient Greek. I'm afraid it's outside my competencies. I more than studying the language, I have been dealing and focusing on what people do with the language. That's what I feel my contribution can be better. I'm not a linguist, and I'm not an Hellenist, unfortunately.
Well, Manuela, thank you so much. It's extremely fascinating. And I know some people in our group have started to learn modern Greek, so it's especially
Thank you very
interesting
much
for us.
for the attention.
So I hope this will get more people reading your book and reading your poems, which as I said, I'll share along with the video. So thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you very much, Keith, and thank everyone else.